5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I farted.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely.
Ready?
I can move you. Making review. Making review.
Say 6,
6,
5,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of Rank and Review. This episode we are going to be looking at the 6 zombie features from master horror director George A. Romero. Series regular Lee Beckman and I are going to do the first installment of a series of episodes called Of the Dead. Volume 1, The Romerothon. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope you feel free to send any feedback you may have to rankandreview@gmail.com. Rank and Review is now on Twitter. You can seek us out there. You can also find us on Facebook and on iTunes. This is your host and random Canadian, Larry Parsons. Thanks for listening to Rank and Review. Please spread the word of Rank and Review to your fellow movie nerd friends. And as usual, I will warn you now that you can expect spoilers and coarse language throughout the podcast. Thank you, and enjoy. Okay, we're rolling.
Yeah. All right.
I'm in Lee Beckman's basement, and Lee Beckman insisted on starting this episode by doing some push-ups.
I'm getting ready. I'm getting ready because this is gonna hurt.
It's gonna hurt?
This is.
Are we starting too late? Are you fatigued?
No, not at all. But this is all about endurance, not making your brain hurt.
Yeah.
Because this is what we would call this basically
Well,
a marathon.
This is going to be a Romerothon for this episode.
Yeah.
This is going to be a 2-episode arc, hopefully, if we can get this done.
Yeah.
The first episode of my Of the Dead series here is going to be dedicated to the 6 George Romero zombie movies. That would, of course, be Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, and wait for it, Survival of the Dead.
It's a lot of dead. It's a lot of dead. It's a lot of zombies eating people.
Indeed. And Lee wanted to do another marathon, and my first instinct was Halloween, but I thought we should do something a little different than another slasher movie. We already took a hit on the Friday the 13th franchise, so we're going to try something different. The other thing that I will say about Romero and the zombie franchise is that, listeners be warned, I'm coming into this with a huge personal bias. I have been a fan of zombie cinema since I was way too young to appreciate the satirical bend of zombie cinema. I've always loved the Romero zombie movies, even though I acknowledge that some of them have flaws. But I come to this a fan. And if you're a person that doesn't like zombie movies and doesn't like gratuitous violence and, doesn't get why people put up with some of the more amateurish corners of Romero, I don't think I'm going to change your mind.
No.
But
if you don't like those things, please stop listening now.
Well, I don't say not listening. I'd say good for you for listening. If you're learning about zombie cinema and this is what you're choosing to go by, I'm thrilled that you chose this podcast. But you're going with a true blue fan. And it's weird, kids growing up today would think that, zombies were always with us, that we had, a zombie movie in the cinemas all the time. This, very recently, this year, saw an Arnold Schwarzenegger starring zombie movie. I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but, we've come to some sort of cultural crescendo here. When you have an Arnold movie about zombies, they're ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I remember taking my kids to see a movie. I don't even remember what the movie was, but all of the trailers. There was like Paranorman and Frankenweenie.
Yeah.
And I think it was Wreck-It Ralph, but there was a zombie joke in the trailer.
Yeah.
Like, even in kids' movies, zombies are just a culturally understood, accepted sort of horror element. And they're popular enough as to be shouldering, you know, some of the big boys out of the way. How many mummy movies do you see, you know?
Yeah.
Comparatively, how many werewolf movies do you see?
I think you can say, if anything, it's past being called a subculture.
Subgenre.
Yeah, it is very much a genre of its own. I mean, there's zombie comedies, there's zombie romances, there's zombie action films.
But I can see how the younger kids listening or whatever would think that this is how it has always been. But no.
There was a lull from, I'd say, the mid-'80s to about late '90s?
I would say the two movies that brought about the zombie renaissance, as we understand it now, would probably be the remake of Dawn of the Dead, Zack Snyder made, which we'll be talking about next episode, and Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later.
Yes.
These were two comparatively low-budget features that made big money and big splashes and influenced culturally. Now, of course, we live in the age of The Walking Dead. But when I found the Romero movies in the late 80s, finding a new zombie movie, finding a Cemetery Man or a Dead Alive was a rare thing. It wasn't like there's going to be another one in the video store next week, you know? It was maybe one every 3 years or so. And with the same ratio of good to bad that you see now, which is for, you know, every one good zombie movie, there's going to be 3 bad ones and 2 completely, you know, meh. Right? But people will, again, dismiss that as a specific genre, right? Oh, they're all crap. Well, your typical slasher movie is kind of meh. You know, people who love the genre will sort of wade through them and find the highlight reel. And the highlight reel of zombie genre is, to a large extent, represented by George Romero. Anybody who has done well in the zombie world has sort of followed Romero rules. So that's me. I have a deep relationship with Romero. Where did you...
like you, I grew up with friends who loved zombie films, and we had long hour conversations of what would we do if, you know, the zombies did take over the earth, and became like epic long 3-hour conversations. You of course know this, man.
In high school I was boring the shit out of people about what I was going to do. But there is this change that has happened to me in my later life, in that I don't find the idea of a zombie apocalypse genuinely exciting anymore.
And that's scary and sad at the same time.
No, nowadays, as, you know, a father of 2, I really, you know, don't think it would be exciting to lock myself in the mall. And interestingly, my initial excitement about the zombie genre had me missing the point of the original Dawn of the Dead. Whereas I thought it would be awesome to own a mall and have all of that stuff and basically rule my little world. And kind of the point of the movie is that, you know, that's a prison that they're in. It's a tomb. It's dressed up and pretty, and it has all of the, you know, accoutrements of home. But it's a tomb. And when you realize that it does actually, believe it or not, zombie cinema has a real good way of sort of speaking satirically, talking about general survival stories, how people react in crisis situations, and sort of what it's like for society to break down. The only thing that sort of is the wild card are the zombies themselves, but sometimes, you know, societies break down. Sometimes the shit hits the fan and people are left to fend for themselves. And typically when that happens, people don't do well. And Romero's honest about that.
Romero's definitely a pessimist. He's not subtle in that regard. He does not think well of humanity.
No. Well... He's definitely a sort of child of the angry 60s. You know, he's not like a mellow flower child. He's raging against the machine, but his tool to rage against them are zombies. Another thing that I wanted to talk about before we got into the podcast proper and the reviews is Romero rules zombies. Romero is a big believer in slow-moving zombies.
He doesn't even call them zombies for a while. He calls them ghouls.
but typically they are slow moving.
Yeah.
And if you get bit, you get sick, you die, you become a zombie.
Yeah.
And everybody who dies becomes a zombie.
Yeah.
The Walking Dead franchise is very loyal to Romero rules.
Yeah.
In that respect. But other zombie films we see where it's viral, they're not technically dead, but they're very zombie. Or, you know, in the Return of the Living Dead franchise, which we'll talk about, they're unkillable and they talk, you know.
Yeah.
These are all empty vessels, more or less. They walk and they eat.
Yep.
And there's no voice to the villain. So all of the drama comes from the human characters trying and struggling to survive.
Yep.
And I don't know, I find it very potent. I really like the plague and apocalypse genre as a rule. And you throw the zombies in it and the violence into it, and I get excited.
Yep. I love the fact that one of the things he's essentially saying is in that sort of universe, you have to keep moving.
Yeah.
You have to keep moving because if you stand still, eventually you will get killed. I think that is a terrifying idea to me, is that you can't really stop.
I understand how aggressive, fast-moving zombies are more exciting for like thrill edgy or cinema writing, but the point that Romero's making is that the slow, insidious thing, it's always there, and it's just creeping up at you, you know?
Yeah.
Always. They don't sleep, they don't eat. Well, they'll eat you, but they won't stop.
Yeah. They could continue to walk on and essentially survive.
Another interesting thing about zombie movies, and I think it's something that I find generally is true throughout the Romero series, and stands out as awkward in some of the Romero emulating series, is that typically in the horror genre there is a balance of the forbidden.
Yeah.
The forbidden being extreme violence and sexuality, nudity, right?
Yep.
Whereas zombie movies typically will bring the violence. They typically don't bring the sexuality.
Yes.
And there's something uniquely unsexy about the zombie world. And one of the things that I do appreciate is that we don't get bogged down typically, at least in the good zombie movies, over who's fucking who and who needs to be rescued and you know the personal needs and intimate. This is pure survival.
Yeah.
And I think that the zombie movies that don't take it seriously, that make it jokey and get tied up and try and wedge in a sex scene that's not needed, are the ones that are getting it wrong. Today, what I want to talk about, again, in my biased opinion, is how to get zombie movies right. And even Romero, in this 6 movies, has some misses.
Yes.
Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Let's do this.
All right.
Of the Dead, Part 1. Romerothon.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the living dead, the dead who live on living flesh. The dead whose haunted souls hunt the living whose bodies are the only food for these ungodly creatures. Night of the living dead.
So in 1968, out comes Night of the Living Dead. And this was a really rough, low-budget, ragged feature made over a series of weekends.
Essentially supposed to be like one of 3 movies at the sort of drive-in, midnight drive-in.
Yeah, but it's definitely sort of the kind of rags to riches story. Well, I would like to call it a rags to riches story, except for they didn't make any money off of this film. But as part
of its tragic history.
As far as a group of people making a movie with friends on weekends for minimal budget, with minimal means, and coming out with a really solid product that, in spite of the fact that it was quite obviously made on a minimal budget by new talent, sort of took the world, at least culturally, by storm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes, as we mentioned, when he sent out the prints to be distributed, to be put out in the drive-in theaters and distributed across the country, they wouldn't be released en masse. They kind of would tour the country.
Yeah.
They neglected to put a copyright label on it.
Yo.
So savvy.
They explain that here.
Yeah, so savvy filmmakers or cinema owners caught that and made copies of it and would air it regularly and make money off of it, which was great for them, but not so good for Romero.
Yeah.
The good news is, at the end of the day, I mean, the exposure of Night of the Living Dead gave pretty much everybody involved in the movie a career.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they deserved to be rich off of it. They deserved more than just that.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. Romero himself said that he didn't really make a profit on Night of the Living Dead until they made the remake in 1990.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that he signs off on this, like, a redubbed version that they did on one anniversary, which actually added scenes very awkwardly into the movie, was just him actually earnestly trying to make, finally, some money off of this movie after all of these decades. The notoriety is great, but he is still, after all of these years, a low-budget filmmaker. And, I don't think he's like a millionaire, you know. He should be, in my mind, he should be this great, you know.
I'm sure he's not hurting for money, though.
Well, I don't know. I'm not his accountant, but I don't see him, you know, living on some private estate somewhere. Maybe he does, and that's great for him. He deserves it, but that's not the picture of him I have in my head.
Yeah,
Anyway, we're kind of getting off course of Night of the Living Dead itself, but there's a lot interesting about the movie peripheral to the movie itself. But I think it's interesting to take it in the context of '68, like the way this movie looks in black and white, and shaky and grainy, like. 2001 came out this year. Like, it doesn't just look old and raggedy and hard to us. I think even at the time it had that quality to it. And I think that's sort of almost, it feels like almost documentary verite style is part of the reason that it stuck with people. And added to which, you know, we have the central player being played by a black man, and that
utterly, which was not deliberate casting to begin with.
He just came in. Actor.
Yeah.
And that to me makes it even more impressive.
No, Night of the Living Dead is a very good example of that whole diamond in the rough. It's something at the right time, right place, right idea, and all the elements came together to make a classic movie.
And the strength of the conceit and the idea overcomes all of the flaws that it has, and the things that you have to overcome when you watch it now.
Yeah.
The movie does feel kind of dated and quaint in a lot of ways watching it in 2015, but it still has a lot of punch and a lot of teeth.
Oh, I know. Well, the idea is very, very sound, and it's a smart idea in a lot of ways.
The characters and the characterizations are not as relatable today as they were when this movie came out.
Yeah.
They do feel like stock characters, and it does have that rough sort of artificial quality to it.
Yeah.
But the sound core idea of this plague that's affecting the entire world, and we're just seeing these few people locked into this one farmhouse.
Yeah.
And the failure, the breakdown of this group of people, their absolute inability to work together.
Yep.
To find some keys and fill a car with gas.
Yeah.
5 people have to find keys, fill a car with gas, and drive away.
Yep.
And they can't
even do it. I know. It's a great, great statement on how we'll eat each other first before, us working together to get out of a relatively simple task.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you have to walk around the zombies, but you could, in essence, walk around them.
Yeah.
You get a couple of torches, you make a path, take a couple of zombies down. It should work.
Yeah.
But alone they cannot, and that is a great, great idea. Here's a question though, and I don't want to change the subject completely.
All right.
But what are some of the rules you have for, let's say, a Romero zombie, and a different zombie?
Well, for me, the Romero zombies, like I say, they're slow.
Yep.
They bite.
Yes.
You have to hit them in the head,
yes.
the brain, in order to kill them.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's about it. We don't really have...
What do you think their main motivation is? Just to
eat you.
It's
they're not trying to eat your brains. They just crave flesh, living human flesh.
So here's the question I have for you.
Okay.
Because when Barbara and what is his name now?
Barbara and her brother Tom are in the cemetery at the beginning, and
of course that zombie comes upon them, and him and Tom have a big fight.
Right.
Where Tom is essentially killed, banged his head against a whole tombstone, and the zombie gets up and chases after Barbara. To which I ask,
he was brained. How was that possible? Is that what you're getting at?
Well, why didn't the zombie just stop and keep on attacking,
eating him?
Yeah, and then instead of going, try and kill her, and he relentlessly pursues her.
Yeah. Well, again, I have to fill in the blanks, and I don't know if Romero has it.
Yeah.
I've talked about it before in franchise things, and the first couple of installments, sometimes I look at it sort of like similar to a TV series.
Yeah.
In the first few episodes, some of the characters don't quite feel like they're in sync right, and there's a few casting changes, and we haven't quite nailed down who this character is yet, and all of the rules aren't succinct. For me, that zombie initially attacked Barbara. That's who he was after.
Yeah.
This dude got in the way. And he got rid of that guy, but for some reason was still focused on Barbara. He was just a nuisance. For some reason, that zombie had locked into Barbara. Is that typical zombie behavior? I don't know. More questionable would be, it looked pretty clear to me like he was supposedly brained, like he smashed his skull into that rock.
Yeah.
That being the case, he shouldn't come back as a zombie and get Barbara. But you know what? Like I said, the conceit of this movie is so strong that I'm going to look way past any of that sort of picky stuff. And the rules aren't really set in any kind of stone for me until we get to the next movie, where it's sort of implicitly told to us through the media. Another forward-thinking thing of this movie is how much of the media is used in it. We see a lot of police reports. We see a lot of our characters huddled around a radio listening, and a lot of them huddled around the TV watching, like you would in a disaster situation, right?
Yeah.
And it's still dramatically compelling and interesting, and it has the that famous quote, they're dead, they're all messed up, which reads both strange and somehow authentic to a live TV interview.
Yeah.
I don't know. All of these things feed into like making it feel real. Working against the fact, like I said, that this is a black and white old movie that we know, shouldn't get to us, but I think does, and I think still works today.
It's also a very good idea that he keeps it relatively all in one place.
Yeah. Budgetarily, that's wonderful. Speaking as a low-budget filmmaker, that's what you want. If you can do it all in a farmhouse...
Yeah.
Ugh.
Have you explained the plot to the viewers? Do they need to know the plot?
Well, that's another of the great interesting things about it. They don't explain why the dead have come to life.
And haven't really.
And Romero never really gives you a definitive answer. And I think that's strong. I think that's a good choice to go with. What answer would we accept? And B, I think it's more interesting to see the survival story than to get bogged down. Some other movie can be about stopping the, government conspiracy or the plague or whatever it is. Yeah. That's not what Romero's interested in. He's interested in the mom and pops, the normal people in their homes, and how they would react to it. And they'd have no fucking idea what was going on. So, neither do we. They have to piece it together, and we piece it together with them. Basically, it's if I didn't implicitly say it, the dead came back to life. Barbara, who was visiting the grave of her mother, she and her brother was attacked. Her brother was killed, and she runs to a nearby farmhouse. She thinks it to be abandoned, but Ben shows up. His car's out of gas. They find that there is indeed people hiding in the basement as well, and they try to survive the night, and like I say, find the keys, fill the car with gas.
Yeah.
If not for the rather elaborate excursion to fill the car with gas and the subsequent explosion that occurs, you could almost do this as a stage play.
Oh, yes.
And because there's no copyright on it, you could without paying Romero a nickel.
Yeah.
The strength of this ending. I mean, like I say,
it's one of the most pessimistic endings, I think, to any movie that I've ever seen. And it earns it, though. It is very right in having that kind of ending. I'm just sort of thinking both of this and the remake, because the endings differ somewhat.
Yeah. Ben, of everybody in the group, in the original film, earnestly does the right thing. He gets goaded in by Cooper, our classic asshole archetype.
Yeah.
And they do squabble with each other, but he's earnestly trying to survive and do the right thing throughout the movie. And he does manage to live through the night, and he earns it.
Yeah.
only to, first thing the next morning, upon peering out the window on hearing what he hopes is rescue, to have his brains blown out by some guy who's shooting first and asking questions later.
Yeah.
And as credits roll, we see people digging hooks into his corpse and dragging him to a pile of bodies to be set on fire.
Yep. Happy, 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 happy.
No way to sugarcoat that shit, man.
Yeah.
Like, that is fucking harsh. And it's not the only harsh thing in the movie. A mother is stabbed to death by the zombie of her child. Another interesting thing, the zombie uses a trowel to kill her mother. We don't typically see them using weapons. Usually they're bitey. But there is something undeniably sort of affecting about that.
Yeah, apparently people have these weird fantasies of, wanting to kill their own mother, and that struck a chord with a lot of people. That particular scene in general.
The new generation, old generation. I don't know. This movie still remains strong. There's a remake, and we're going to talk about it when we do the next episode. But I think that it's one of these movies that doesn't really require a remake. I'm happy that Romero made money off of it, but this movie is a capital C classic horror movie. If you like horror movies a little bit, you should watch it. Yeah.
One of the things that I think works so well for it, especially because they didn't have a lot of money, is they shot the film in a sort of film noir lighting. It feels in some ways very film noirish, with a bunch of desperate characters, in a sort of dark, almost criminal story. I mean, it's a horror movie, it's a monster movie, but just the lighting of it, that's one thing that's really, really good. And I was kind of surprised to know, I really enjoyed the sound, the music.
Yeah.
But you were right, a lot of it was just sort of stock footage.
Yeah, well, Romero, being a micro-budget filmmaker, was just getting his hands on anything he could.
Yeah.
If you can use some footage or some music for free, why not save the money?
Yeah.
And if it works, and I mean, it's dated like the rest of the movie, but I don't find it overly obtrusive.
Yeah.
The only time in the movie where I kind of find it a little bit in the way is when Barbara first arrives at the farmhouse, and she's walking through, and there's sudden close-ups of the trophy animals on the walls, and the music jumps, and that's supposed to be some sort of jump scare for us.
Yeah.
It's just maybe at the time that was considered a scare, but nowadays there's nothing scary about that. We're just glad that Barbara's found a safe place, even if it does have animal heads hanging on the wall.
Yeah. When Night of the Living Dead tries to be a jump scare movie, it doesn't work. But it's, like you said, the idea of it, that these things just never do stop, and then it can easily overcome you. Yeah. It's a very slow-paced, horrifying movie, where there's just this huge sense of dread that is undeniable about it, that it sort of produces.
And it still works today.
Yeah.
In 1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its time.
Not that room! Not that room!
Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all times.
It gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill. This situation must be controlled before it's too late. They are multiplying too rapidly.
Dawn of the Dead.
Meet me on the roof at 9 o'clock. Getting out.
I don't believe
We're
it.
gonna
What?
get out in the chopper. We've got to survive. Somebody's got to survive.
They kill for one reason. They kill for food. They eat their victims.
Imagine, if you will, that something has gone terribly wrong.
Shoot it, man.
Now, accept the fact that there's no escaping the horrible consequences. George Romero brings back the dead. Night of the Living Dead has ended. Dawn of the Dead is here.
So fast forward 10 years. 1978. Romero had come out with a couple of small features in the in-between. The Crazies came out, which was sort of a faux zombie movie, and there's always Vanilla, but people seemed less interested in Romero movies that weren't zombie-centric.
Yeah.
And although they got made, they didn't really get widely seen. I'm sure that they're more widely watched today than they were when they were initially released. So I think that this thing that haunts Romero through a lot of his career comes right out of the gate early in the career here in '78, and that part of him is kind of giving the people what they want.
Yeah.
In fact, I kind of think Dawn of the Dead, and maybe indeed the rest of the zombie franchise, would not have happened if not for one Dario Argento, who basically swooped in and said to Romero, "I am a huge fan. I'm going to fly you to Rome or Italy, and I'm going to put you in a hotel room. And I want you to write a sequel. And I'm going to do everything I can to inspire you. I'm going to get you hooked up with the Goblins for the musical score, which was sort of a big hip thing at the time. Mm-hmm. And Argento was this sort of huge, respected artiste of, wearing many hats. And I've spoken aloud in the past on my podcast, is that I'm not a fan a lot of the time of Argento the filmmaker. Yeah. But I will thank him deeply and forever for getting Romero to this point, because Dawn of the Dead is an epic fucking horror movie.
It is one of the best horror films of all time. As much as Night is a classic, Dawn is, and I'm putting this out here now, the best zombie film out of the entire series. I think no one could prepare people for what came when Dawn kind of came out. Not only just from the sheer epic zombie violence, but just the sheer storytelling. And even to the lesser extent, the acting in this movie. Yes, there's some uneven performances, but the characters are very relatable. And that's one of the other things that really works with this movie.
He upped the ante in every way. He boosted the scale. Originally, we have a farmhouse. In this one, we have a mall.
Yeah.
And the movie opens sort of with this crazy apocalyptic sequence.
Yeah, the zombies have started to win. Yeah. They are clearly winning the war, and winning the war very quickly.
Especially in the cities, where in this one apartment complex, they've been storing the dead in the basement of the building.
Yeah.
So this squad of the police come in to try and clear that out and get the people out of the building. They don't want to leave their homes, so conflict happens and racial things flare up. The cops who are fighting the people and the zombies are starting to lose their shit. Yeah. Some of them are committing suicide, some of them are shooting each other, some of them are just splitting. But it's clear. Things are falling apart. The center is not holding.
Yeah.
In the middle of this, we meet Fran and her boyfriend Steven, who we will refer to heretofore as Flyboy.
Yes.
He's the weatherman for the local news station. She's a producer. And they're going to steal the helicopter, and they're going to find a safe place to be. Yep. They mutually know this man, Peter, who is on one of the SWAT teams.
Yeah.
Peter, almost at random, meets Roger in the middle of this chaos and decides he's going to be a helpful guy to have around. Yeah. Invites him along, and the four of them trot along in this apocalyptic zombie landscape. Eventually, the first sort of act of the movie ends with them finding this mall, this safe haven.
Alleged Utopia. Utopia.
So that's the basic setup of the movie. Before we continue to ooh and ah all over this movie, I think that I should prepare people who are coming in as newbies.
Yep.
This is an incredibly 70s movie.
Yeah.
And it's dated in the same way that the original... Well, it's not the same way that the original is dated, but in the same way you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt.
There are certain things you have to swallow with this movie. Yeah. And definitely its time and when it was made is definitely one of them, from the music on down.
And there's the great addition of Tom Savini, who does some wonderful for-the-time gore effects for no money. But of all the wins he has in this movie, with the amount of zombie extras and the money they had, and they did have some money to play with, the best he could do would be to do a general wash gray paint on all of the extras. And depending on the lights and the different scenes, sometimes the zombies look blue, sometimes they look gray, sometimes it's strange. There's a weird inconsistency to the look of the zombies. That said, I always know if I'm looking at a zombie and if I'm looking at a person. I can tell right away.
Yeah.
So in that measure, the job is done, but the zombies could look better.
Yeah.
beyond that, pretty much everything I'm going to say now is positive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that, can we start, gushing about the film now?
Gush.
Yeah, one of the things that works really well, and I think with any sort of sci-fi or horror film, is the attention to detail of the universe has to be one thing that has to be examined quite intensely.
Yeah.
And that is done very well with Dawn of the Dead, even from the first 50 minutes where things are, people losing their shit, and that whole sequence inside the building, I think is a perfect, introduction to about how bad this movie has gotten, and just the insanity of it, and even the look of the building, and people fleeing in the background, and even in the foreground in some regard.
Yeah.
That is all done really, really, really well.
And that great thing, and I keep mentioning it whenever I do a zombie movie, and that all these people that we're blurring by, they all have their stories.
Mm-hmm.
However short or long they may end up being, everybody's fighting to survive.
Yeah.
We just, end up following this particular group of survivors.
Yeah.
I think when you go to see this in 1978,
Yeah.
what it brings is a lot of pop fun and entertainment. Because I do think it's actually a fairly fun, by Romero standards, zombie movies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still oppressive and dark, but not as dark as it could be, as we'll discuss. And the other thing is some of the effects. There's a scene where a zombie gets the top of its head clipped off by the blades of a helicopter. I can't think of anything that people had seen that would have compared to that at the time, right? Like, and so much of it throughout the movie. And like we've discussed right away, like one of the first kills we see in the movie is this guy getting his head obliterated by a shotgun, and there's this whoa shit thing right out the gate. Like,
Yeah.
this is I just barely settled in my seat. Oh my god! Like,
And we
whoa.
still have 120 minutes to go,
And we're just getting started.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting structurally the movie, because the first 40 minutes of the movie, very tight, action packed.
Yeah.
Even their journey, where they pass over the rednecks killing the zombies, and they stop to refuel. There's a lot of sort of adventure, almost like chapter 1, chapter 2 energy.
Yeah.
It's weird because once we get to this mall, and once they sort of settle in and they block off the doors and they start living in their utopia,
Yeah.
everything stops for a while.
Yeah.
And especially, we're talking, we both viewed the extended cut, the director's cut, if you were, which is, I think, 2 hours and 19 minutes. It's a lot of zombie movie, but it earns it.
Yeah.
So especially in the director's cut, this middle chapter is stretched out.
Yeah.
And part of you starts, I think because you're a genre freak and I'm a genre freak, wanting the zombies to come.
Yeah.
And you don't want the zombies to come and eat the people, but it's interesting because the boredom, or the potential boredom, I don't want to tell people this is boring, but
No.
it's reflected in the characters.
Yeah.
Like, the characters start going fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
They have everything they could need.
At
They
least
have all the
materialistic
food.
wise, yeah.
They have all the fancy, record players and all this, accoutrements and all alcohol, anything that they want.
Yeah.
This is their kingdom, and there's enough to go around. They don't have to squabble over it.
Yeah.
And right away, it's a trap.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And it's interesting that, like I said in the introduction, that when I was a young kid, I kind of missed that.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, and I'm seriously talking a kid, 10, 12 years old,
Yeah.
the middle part was kind of boring. I think the middle part is where you get your humor and your satire.
Oh, absolutely.
And the middle part is where you realize that you're invested in these characters.
Yeah.
In spite of all the violence and craziness around it, when Roger gets bit,
It's
oh no.
yeah.
It's devastating.
And
to the
Roger
group.
was kind of being a bit of a
He was
suicidal-
losing it.
Yeah.
There's a reason that he got bit. He was flaking out.
Yeah.
And it was his fault, and he probably wouldn't argue that.
Yeah.
But you feel it, and
Yeah.
the group feels it. Like, they're going to lose this guy, and that's a quarter of their group, and that's going to make it that much harder for them to survive.
Yeah.
And it's weird how that sneaks up on you.
Yeah. The acting also really helps with this movie because it's pretty solid and pretty first rate, excuse me.
Especially because that's something that Romero's not particularly good at.
Yeah, no, he lucked out. He lucked out with this movie.
He has a habit of casting his friends.
Yep.
And a habit of casting, people that he likes.
Yeah.
Like, he sees somebody in a play and he reads in the, back of the card that they happen to be from his hometown.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to work with them then. You know, like,
Yeah.
well, I'll find a part for them in this movie, whether or not they're right for it or not. Romero can be guilty of that, but you're
Yeah.
right. I think especially with the core cast, he did very well here. Could you give me the name of the actress who plays Francine? Sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
Galen Ross.
Yeah, this was like her first movie, and she was like so petrified while she was doing it that she was like seeing an acting coach, a professional acting coach, like on her days in between shooting, like and doing the best she can. And I think she does well, and I think that the SWAT guys do well too.
Yeah.
I think if there's a weak link in the chain, it's the Flyboy.
Yeah.
And I think he's almost redeemed. In a way, he's kind of got the bitch role of the group, because he's always doing shit wrong and getting things wrong. In fact, it's almost like the definition of his character. Scott Reniger? What's his name? What's the name of the actor, sorry, who plays Flyboy? Just so...
Steven. David Emge.
David Emge, thank you.
Emge,
who plays Steven. He's kind of got that thankless role. He's weaker than these SWAT guys. He's not as good at handling himself, and he's always fucking up. And unfortunately, aside from a few minor wins for him, that basically defines his character.
But he's the only one that could fly the helicopter, at least for a while.
But that's when he really slits his own throat, when he teaches Francine how to fly the helicopter. He is no longer essential to the group. But like I was saying, with the performance, he has some tough lines to choke down, and he's got sort of the character that is sort of difficult to like in some ways. He's always getting things wrong. But I think the performance is somewhat redeemed when he, spoilers, we get to see him as a zombie.
Yeah.
He has this absolutely brutal, crooked zombie walk. And I love that it might even be a hint to Bub, to where we're going with smarter zombies. Mm-hmm. They boarded up the door so that the stairwell, as far as people who come into the mall, doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. But he was one of the people who built that barrier. And when he becomes a zombie, he walks right to that barrier and claws his way through it. Mm-hmm. And he walks up the stairs to where they're living. Mm-hmm. And he opens the door and he comes in. And he shuts the door behind him. Like, when I was a kid, I thought he was leading the zombies up. Mm-hmm. And now I kind of just think this is instinctively what he wants. It's just like all the zombies coming to the mall. They instinctively think there's something at the mall that they want. Yeah. He knows whatever it is that he vainly remembers wanting was in this place that was hidden. Mm-hmm. And he comes home and he shuts the door. Mm-hmm. And Peter blows his brains out. Which was, the right thing to do. Yeah. But, like, in a way, I got more pathos out of his character when he became a zombie. So that's maybe not high praise. But he's good enough. He's not, like, loudly awful. I would just say he was probably the weakest of the group. Yeah. Yeah. But, this is a movie that I'm heaping high praise on.
Well, hey, if you look behind you, I know people at home, this is radio, not television. But if you can imagine My Little Man Cave, and there's some movie posters on here, right behind Sir Lawrence is a Dawn of the Dead poster. This film basically has its social imprint on film legend, if you will, filmography.
I think it will have legs and it will last.
Yeah.
And I think for all the praise people heap on Zack Snyder's remake, it's in no way an improvement.
Well, see, here's the thing. Dawn of the Dead, this version, is very much a horror film, and even the base of it is actually quite slow and methodic. Yeah. What's terrifying them about them, especially the zombies in this one, is there's all these fight sequences where people are rolling around at each other and they're just, like, slowly snapping away at them, which are just utterly terrifying. Yeah. And it's just relentless and ongoing. Where in Snyder's versions, there's these super fast, violent, physical, almost rage monster zombies, which are terrifying in its own way. But there's something about it where, they can...
different. Yeah.
They can sort of, like, fall out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you've got this very tense battle on the ground between these two people that is just scary. It's scary.
Two other big points that I wanted to say before we move on from Dawn of the Dead. But, I think kudos to George Romero, well, across the board, but how prescient he was. Yeah. This is a movie where they actually have a plot point where they have to explain what a mall is. Yeah. Because these large indoor malls, as they call it, were a relatively new thing on the landscape in the mid to late 70s.
Yeah.
In fact, the mall that they shot in, he just happened to know the guys who owned the property. Just that sort of sparked the idea in his head when he realized he could have access to this place. It's like he's expanded the farmhouse to the nth degree. But as far as his attack on consumerism, before the culture had decayed to the extent that it has today, he saw it right away and was commenting on it before people even knew it was a problem. So kudos to that.
Yeah, I love the fact that in a lot of ways it's social commentary on the whole capitalism and making us all sort of zombie slaves.
But he's not sticking our nose in the shit either.
No,
he's still making a very entertaining movie.
Yeah, no.
But he's calling the world on its bullshit.
Yeah, and...
and the other thing for you gorehounds, because lest we forget... You know,
Oh.
Tom Savini's going to stab a zombie in the ear with a screwdriver for you.
Yeah.
And he's going to play one of the bikers who comes to take over the mall, you know. And the gore effects are still wonderful
The last
today.
20 minutes alone are sheer beauty.
Shit gets ugly.
Oh, yeah, and it's just, once again, relentless.
Is there anything more you want to say? We're almost 17 minutes.
No, I think we have to soldier on.
So, yeah, we like Dawn of the Dead, kids.
First came the night, then came the dawn. Now comes the most eagerly awaited day in horror film history. George A. Romero's Day of the Dead.
We've been punished by the Creator. We visited a curse.
Hello? Is anyone there?
For the few remaining, their only hope of survival is to find a cure.
You're wasting time trying to define what's happening.
But the odds are against them.
We're in the minority now. Something like 400,000 to 1 by my calculations.
And so is Captain Rhodes.
Anybody else have any questions about the way things are gonna run around here from now on?
Their one chance is Bub.
It's working on instinct. A deep, dark, primordial instinct.
But their time is running out.
They can be fooled, don't you see? They can be tricked into being good little girls and boys. Same way we were tricked into it on the promise of some reward to come.
But when the tricks wouldn't work...
They're learning. They're actually learning.
Their world fell apart.
So now we jump ahead to 1985, which was kind of a... There's a really good period here in the mid-80s. There was actually a stretch here where within a few months of each other, Return of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, and The Reanimator all piled in, almost one on top of the other. Just an embarrassment of riches here nestled in the middle of the 80s. Day of the Dead was the least successful and least well-received of the three mentioned. It was the darkest day horrors ever known, as they say in the trailer, but it was also a fairly dark time for Romero. Having a hard time getting things made, and he was working his relationship with Stephen King, who did the Creep Show. He almost ended up doing The Stand. He almost ended up doing Salem's Lot. There were a lot of almosts. So here he was doing another zombie movie. He got it in his head that he can do a zombie movie a decade. Sadly, fate would deny him even that. But here he is with Day of the Dead. And I think that his frustration and his bitterness is all in this script. Like, this is a dark, ugly movie full of, really unlikable characters for the large part.
They're not even characters, they're caricatures.
Yeah. Particularly the military characters.
The essential antagonists of the movies. They're not even real characters. They're just very loud imprints of human emotion in a lot of ways.
Hateful, squealing ignorance.
They yell all the lines.
And it's got more fucks in it than your typical Quentin Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
In fact, that was what got him in trouble with the ratings when they were in production, before they even got to the visceral, physical, prosthetic effects. this is the movie that was going to bring about some Greg Nicotero, who's just a kid working on this one, you know, and K&B effects weren't a thing yet, but these guys were, you know, worked on this, do Evil Dead 2, and go on to take over the world, basically, of makeup effects. So, what's not working for me in this movie is the bad guys. I know the bad guys are always humans, like we talk about. Zombies are a problem, an obstacle. The real villains, the real enemy is other people. I get that. But we need interesting enemies. We need believable enemies, and we don't have that here. But here comes my but. But what we do have is another great setting. Another great... I think that the ABCD of the story, the basic idea of it, is sound. I think that we needed to have better villains. I think that we needed to have villains that were equal to our protagonists. And we don't. But we do have possibly the greatest prosthetic effects ever put to film. I think that the only two films that come close are David Cronenberg's Fly and John Carpenter's The Thing. As far as visceral, believable, ouch, cringeworthy, holy shit, practical makeup effects, Day of the Dead. Period. So for you gore fans out there, Day of the Dead may be, you know, the bath that you want to get into.
It has probably the best display of zombie violence out of the entire series. It definitely earns its mojo there. I agree with you, though, that the villains really take away the power, what could have been pretty powerful scenes. And so that essentially kills the story. Like, we feel nothing for them. We are happy for them that they are being ripped apart by the end, and that's all well and good, but we feel really nothing for them.
Well, there is a script for Day of the Dead. You can read it. I have it on the special edition DVD. You can find it online. It was a much more involved, much more, obviously would require a much bigger budget. Romero may or may not have gotten his own way upon insisting on the level of the language and the violence, because in order to keep that, he lost his budget. And in order to accommodate losing his budget, basically this huge story that was going to go on above ground in the mines, the second, I don't know if it was a lead story, but the second story, the second tier story of the movie, was utterly scrapped. And it was very involved with them basically training zombies to fight other zombies, and quite large in scale and ambitious. And he had that taken away from him at the last minute. And he basically had to do this script overhaul. And I think, again, the bitterness comes through in the screenplay. And that, I guess, kind of works for the darkness and complete apocalyptic feel of the piece. Because by this point in the Romero world, we're far enough along in the zombie apocalypse.
No, the zombies have won the war, essentially.
These people are living in an underground bunker, and they're spending their days trying to find if there's anyone else alive in the fucking world. They're flying to empty cities and just calling out on a microphone to see if anybody will answer. And, you know, other scientists are either looking for a cure, a way to eradicate the zombie problem, or in the case of the character played by Richard Liberty, as sort of an interesting quack Dr. Frankenstein, trying to teach the zombies to be domesticated, to behave. A lot of interesting stuff there. And I think that it could be a double-edged sword, because my guess is that the big sort of operatic sweeping military complex thing that he was intending to do may not have held together entirely either. But having to shrink it down to sort of its bare essentials, we get too much white hat, black hat, like we say. There's the, you know, fuck screaming, rapey military guys. And then there's the hippie, pot-smoking, you know, let's all get along, man, sort of B-roll characters.
Yes, the stereotypical Jamaican English characters. Well, very cliched, but yes.
I talked with some enthusiasm when we were talking about Dawn of the Dead about the zombie performance given by the Flyboy character, David Emge.
Yes.
Here, I think, Special mention needs to be made to Bub. Could you get the actor's name there?
Bub.
Is it Shermer? Howard Shermer?
Sherman Howard.
Sherman Howard plays Bub.
Yeah.
And he's sort of the prize pupil of the Mad Doctor. It's interesting. Well, there's nothing that's not interesting about a lot of those scenes. Some of my favorite stuff in the movie is him showing the Bub, the Stephen King Book of Salem Lot, and the Walkman, and the essential flaw in his plan. And he is fairly successful in domesticating Bub.
Yes.
But the catch is, in order to do so, he's been feeding Bub.
Yeah.
And Bub sort of trusts the doctor in the same way the dog trusts the food provider. He's not going to kill the food provider because the food provider keeps bringing him food, so why would he kill that dude?
Yeah.
Seems to be where he's landed. But clearly the doctor is crazy.
Yeah.
So
he makes some pretty sound judgment calls. One of the questions I have for you is, do you think Romero believes in a military state? Because I sure don't after this movie.
Well, but it takes the edge off of it that they are all that evil. It's sort of crystallized in Rhodes, the John Polito character. Interesting, Polito played a small part in Dawn of the Dead. This is another case of Romero meeting an actor he liked and reusing him. And I think that Polito definitely delivers exactly what Romero wanted of him. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he's delivering what Romero intended. Like, nobody... Again, this is, as hateful as it is, this is what Romero wants. But I think it oversimplifies it. It makes the military guys look dumb and uncomplicated. Mm-hmm. They're just blandly, blackly evil. Laurie Cardell, who's our protagonist in this, she seems to be the one person who sees sort of the madness, you know? It's an impossible situation. Can you imagine living in a box under the ground, and as far as you know, everyone else is dead, and the people that you are living with spend all of their days just fucking screaming obscenities at each other? Like, what are we living for at this point?
It's pretty sad and dark.
It is. It is. And painting himself into that corner, this is genuine. That's maybe how it would be. How entertaining that is, and how much pleasure you can derive from it. Well, that's the question, isn't it?
It's almost like a really dark reality TV show in a lot of ways in that regard.
But again, it is Romero sort of truth-telling. It's maybe not as entertaining or as sort of fun as the adventure presented to us in Dawn of the Dead. Unless we forget, Dawn of the Dead ends in a dark place.
Yeah.
2 of our people are still alive, but they have no weapons, they have minimal fuel, and they're flying to an uncertain future.
Yeah.
And the best case scenario is they've ended up in a box like these people are in. So, it's not a good it's not a good world for them. And what is the win? In this scenario, the idea is that they can just go find an island somewhere and go fishing. And that sure as hell would be preferable.
And Romero does explore that later on in the series and how futile that is.
Absolutely. So I think what I'm getting at from my perspective is that it is a mixed bag.
It is. Its flaws are apparent.
But I love Bub. I love the visceral special effects. I love, there's an amazing scene where one of our characters is bit, and our main character knocks him over the head with a rock and cuts off his arm. And it looks almost, it's several shots, but it's so convincing.
The idea is there for an amazing zombie movie.
Yeah.
In a word of a lie, it's the first time in the series where the story just didn't grab me. And I think it was just the presentation of it.
Yeah.
I definitely understand its cult popularity. The zombie prosthetics are second to none. Like, it is the champion of the series.
Dark. It's just, I think that Dawn was so fun. Yeah. I think that's part of the thing about Day of the Dead. There's just no fun here. That seems harsh, but compared to Dawn of the Dead, there's no fun here. It definitely has moments of levity and some great special effects. A zombie gets its head split in half at the jawline,
yeah,
and we see the top half of its head laying on the mine floor looking around. presumably the way it will until it manages to rot away to nothing. And it's really convincingly realized and horrifying in its own right to the fate of that creature.
Yeah.
But I can't hate this movie because I've spent too much of my life loving it. But I understand that there are flaws. I think if you're a fan of horror movies, you should watch Day of the Dead.
Oh,
I understand that it's not everybody's bag, and you know, it does. It's got, the wheels are a little creaky, and I can't pretend that that's not the case. But I still think here at this dividing line in, you know, the first three movies, we're coming to the end of this review of Day of the Dead. Basically the first half of the Romero zombie movies is going to come to a close here. And I think, you know, with the production moving to Canada and the budgets going steeper and steeper downhill as we progress, we are entering shaky territory. And part of the charm of Romero is that he's low budget, he's handmade, and there are flaws. There's something that's just the feeling like it's almost barely hanging together in some places, but he can make it work. He holds it together. The center does hold, and it holds enough for this to be an interesting movie. It's certainly not as fun. You're not going to get any laughs out of it like you will with Reanimator or Return of the Living Dead, but it's interesting, and it's not repeating himself. So it's worth a look.
They're moving toward the city.
There's nothing there, man. They're communicating. They're thinking.
We're going back to see if we can help.
Trouble?
In a world where the dead are returning to life, the word trouble loses much of its meaning.
We're running out of time.
George A. Romero's Land of the Dead.
Zombies, man. They creep me out.
So I've said before that the 90s generally, I think, was overall kind of a weak decade for horror movies. There were okay things that happened in the 90s, don't get me wrong. Scream had a, you know, sort of the good satirical run.
Blair Witch.
Yeah, but it wasn't until towards the end of the 90s where things started to sharpen, get a little bit proper dark again. I think that the wink sort of took a lot of the edge out of horror. Yeah. And as we said, by the end of the 80s, zombies had lost their appeal, and in the 90s, zombies were not a big deal until, like I say, Zack Snyder and Danny Boyle revalidated them in the early aughts. Mm-hmm. So Romero didn't manage what he'd originally intended, as he'd said with Day of the Dead, to do a zombie movie per decade, because he wasn't able to make one in the 90s. He had a troublesome production with Monkey Shines in the dark half for Stephen King, and he was still working, but again, there's a lot of failed productions and false starts. And
he came very close to doing the Resident Evil movie, at least the first one.
Yeah. Again, that seems to be his story. I think that creatively Romero's lack of compromise may get in his way of, you know, paycheck movies. And maybe in his heart he doesn't want to make paycheck movies. He wants to make low-budget movies. Yeah. The point is, it's not until 2005 when he's actually offered money, because zombies are back and in vogue again, to do Land of the Dead. And by this time, I think he's ready to do another zombie movie. I think this is different from Day of the Dead in that, you know, he's doing a zombie movie because he knows that he's chumming the waters for what the fans want. I think that he had this idea for Dead Reckoning. That script had been around for a while, and because it involved basically a militarized tank vehicle and a much further along progressed zombie apocalypse than he'd attempted above ground until this point, he couldn't do Day of the Dead again. If he didn't have the scope, it was kind of hard to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
So here we are. George Romero's first and only studio-backed zombie movie, you know, big money to be spent.
Yeah.
He brings Dennis Hopper and John Leguizamo and Simon Baker.
And Asia Argento, yes.
And Asia Argento, there again, the connection with Dario. So, it actually a fairly interesting cast. Robert Joy sort of playing
It's by far the best cast of, at least acting-wise, of the series.
He wasn't able to populate it entirely with friends.
Yeah.
And the production has moved to Canada. This was shot in Toronto.
Yeah.
In fact, the entire second half of this zombie catalog leading into Survival of the Dead, all of them were Canadian-made. And at this point, I believe Romero himself is dual citizenship to Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
That's all besides the point. It's kind of interesting to see Romero playing with a budget because you don't see it a lot.
It's his most polished movie out of the series.
And it makes sense because the money was there to do it.
You know, a lot of the technical skill is very high water.
Yeah.
Whether it's the cinematography, the sets looked very well and put together.
Yeah.
Once again, the attention to detail the universe is one thing that really works for this film. Of course, having a studio make this movie, you're going to get studio actors, you know, at least ones that are very, very competent, and he has that here with Land. Whether it's, like you said, Simon Baker, or Robert Joy, or Asia, you said?
Asia Argento, I believe.
Okay,
I've been saying it wrong. That's what he calls her, and he's known her since she was a child. So.
Okay. John
Maybe
Leguizamo,
it's Asia,
Simon Baker, Dennis Hopper, of course.
Yeah.
Who I think is brilliantly cast.
Yeah, Dennis Hopper is our evil corporate sort of Bush figure.
Well, he's basically supposed to be Lumsfeld, right? Donald Lumsfeld?
Rumsfeld?
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of works too, I guess.
Yeah.
Basically, he's sort of greed personified.
Yeah.
And also, you know, racist to boot. We'll talk about plot. I think one of the interesting things to say too is that this is one of the first like mainstream quote unquote zombie movies, which begins way after the zombies have gotten here. Like by this point, years have gone by. People have grown up in the zombie apocalypse. There's a pocket of humanity that survived around the zombie apocalypse. So we don't have the beginning, those moments where, holy shit, what's going on and the world's falling apart. Yeah. The world has fallen. Yeah. People who are wealthy live in these sort of high-rise palaces in a place called Fiddler's Green. Mm-hmm. It's sort of, because of the sort of convergence of two rivers and it's sort of landlocked, protected on several sides. Yeah. They're able to keep the zombies away and live fairly successfully, autonomously. Well, the poor people either live sort of miserable lives on the street or make pittances running errands for the rich, driving into the sort of no-man's zombie-populated world to get supplies that are needed. So Dennis Hopper sort of is the sort of lord figure, you know, counting his gold coins up in his ivory tower, and sort of the counterweight to this are Simon Baker and, I guess, John Leguizamo. It's weird. We're supposed to like John Leguizamo for, I guess, no reason other than he's John Leguizamo, as his character is kind of a dick the entire movie.
An irresponsible dick to boot.
Yeah. He gets people...
Cholo.
We sort of get to know him by him sloppily getting this kid killed by just being foolhardy and trying to selfishly get himself some champagne. And he's told not to do things, he does them anyway, and it costs someone his life, and he shrugs it off. Despite this, we are asked to like him. And I think we like him because of John Leguizamo gives him more personality than a lot of the characters around him tend to have. He's got some depth to him, but I think in his heart of hearts, he wants to be the Dennis Hopper character. Mm-hmm. He would be the guy up in the tower counting his coins, denying people if he could. I really believe. I think the Simon Baker character is more of an idealist. He keeps saying he's looking for a world without fences. However realistic that may be. But if he can get his hands on the vehicle, for instance, this heavily militarized tank-looking thing called Dead Reckoning, perhaps he could just eke out a living on the road.
Yeah.
So, right away, he's bringing a lot new to the bear, and I get the feeling like he's been thinking about this one for a while. Mm-hmm. And he introduces new things into sort of the zombie mythos. My favorite being the fireworks. The zombies get distracted. You set off fireworks into the sky, and the zombies just look up, hypnotized, and you can walk right by them and steal stuff and not worry about them trying to attack you because pretty lights, right?
Yeah.
I thought that was a nice touch, and it was a new addition that I didn't think, jumped the shark or anything like that. I mean, as much as you can buy it, I bought it.
Yeah.
The zombies get hypnotized by pretty lights, so be it.
Yeah.
I liked it. And I really liked seeing the special effects on zombies. These aren't zombies just with paint on them. These are like real cool prosthetic effects, some of them completely animatronic.
Yes, Greg Nicotero certainly definitely earned his paycheck with this one as well.
Yeah. So these are all the things that are the positives. So I'm going to get around to the negatives, but I'm wondering if you can anticipate me.
Well, I think we've had this discussion earlier, and I think if you were to ask Romero this question, he would be open and honest. He's always loved the zombies.
Yeah.
He's never really seen them as villains, which, I can understand them, you having issues with that. Because in this one, for sure, the zombies are really not villains. I mean, yes, they're still the zombies, and they're still trying to, trying to get at the people. But they're definitely seen as more of a victim.
We've progressed to the point, and we were introduced to Bub in the last movie. So the idea of the zombies having some sort of understanding of not right or wrong, but vengeance, or, caring about somebody and being angry that they died. Like, we've seen that they have some ability, especially when coached, to sort of remember more of their past selves.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. But for me, I like the fact that zombie movies are like survival movies, right? I'm always uncomfortable when I'm asked to cheer for the zombies. And I do think that that's what happens here. These guys who are raiding this town start firing their guns willy-nilly, killing the zombies. Not necessarily just because they're yeehaw, rednecks, but because the fireworks cannons or whatever fail momentarily, and the zombies are no longer distracted, so they end up opening fire. They didn't even necessarily go there meaning to shoot all the zombies. They were taking the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
But they end up shooting the shit out of the town. And this one zombie, who is, I guess, referred to as Big Daddy, particularly seems smart, and is very upset that these people came to his town, shot up the place, took a bunch of stuff, and killed some zombies. Over and above that, one zombie who is sort of amusingly decapitated by a gunfire, he compassionately crushes the head so that it doesn't have to suffer an existence of just being a head on a curb. And the zombies take up arms and walk in the directions that the vehicles left, towards Fiddler's Green, to go to war, basically. I'm even okay with the zombies following them to the source, or even if it was a vengeance-minded thing. I just don't take it as far as I'm on the zombie side. If I'm on the zombie side, what the zombies really want is to eat people. So I'm not on board with that.
Yeah.
I'm on humanity's side. At some point, Romero either got so cynical that his switch completely flipped, or, he just believes that flesh-eating zombies are genuinely of more merit than humanity itself. Which, as dark as I can sometimes go, I can't follow him down that road. No, I don't side with those zombies. And a lot of the scenes with the zombies sort of learning and seeing other zombies being strung up in trees and getting angry, those scenes don't have any weight for me. And especially at the end when Simon Baker's character sees that group of survivor zombies wandering off in their own direction, and he could kill them.
They just want to be, what was the line he used?
They're just looking for a place to be, just like the rest of us, is basically what he says. And to me, I say, no, well, I mean, I guess they're looking for a place to be, but anybody that they come across, they will kill and eat.
Yeah.
And they've proven themselves to be a more than usual threat, so not killing them is actually, I think, stupid.
Yes.
Romero would disagree with me on that. I've gone off book with Romero here, but I like the movie.
Yeah.
It's that one little element of the movie that I don't like. I'm siding with the humans, And as you know, much as Dennis Hopper twirls his mustache a little bit and has some really juicy "I'm a bad dude" lines, it's nowhere near the cartoon that we were presented with Day. There's a little bit of complexity to him, and it's kind of sad that the John Leguizamo character aspires to be one of these dickheads, but here he is wanting to be on board. Romero, again, using actors that he likes and friends, I think also is trusting of the special effects department. He's famously said to Savini when he's got a new movie coming up, "I got a new movie, so think of ways to kill people." That's all well and good, but there's one kill in particular and a couple of others, which I think kind of breaks the arm of the zombie rules to me. There's one zombie that's head is snapped sort of backwards, and its spine sort of springs back with the head attached to bite somebody. And that zombie's neck was broken. It either shouldn't have been moving and its brain was still alive, or I don't know. For me, that just didn't... It was a cool special effect, but it went around the rules. And, Savini wasn't doing the effects in this one. So he has a very brief appearance, but yeah, because he just sort of hands it over, yeah, do what you want, that looks cool, whether or not it makes sense within the world I established. Yeah. There's a few little things like that. If you really want to nitpick this movie, yeah, there are problems. Asia Argento is beautiful, but I think there's a language barrier, and not all the performance I think comes across necessarily. And some of the dialogue is a little Romero-y,
It's clunky. Yes.
There's a little bit of clunk to it. But the movie works enough, and it brings new ideas to the board, and it progresses sort of the story of the franchise further along. And in that way, it's successful. It's not an A-plus movie, it's certainly not Dawn of the Dead, but it's cool to see Romero with a budget, and it's Romero warts and all, and I am entertained. Is there anything else you want to say about Land? Sorry,
No.
brother, I feel like I mowed right over you.
No, you pretty much said it. And
Two news agencies are reporting accounts of the dead returning to life.
What's that?
What was that?
You can't talk about it being an epidemic. About being an epidemic.
What is this about, Jason?
This turns out to be a big thing. I just want to record it.
For this sort of failure, like government agencies, support organization.
Look. Looks hurt.
It's all burned up.
The problem doesn't seem to be that people are waking up dead. The dead people are waking up.
It's not going down! Shoot in the head!
So in 2007, out comes Diary of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
And what you have here, it's not exactly found footage, but it's
of that ilk.
It's a faux documentary.
It's of that sub-genre, if you will.
And I think that even though Land of the Dead was only kind of a modest success, I think it might have lit the engine a little bit for Romero and zombies again.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of maybe even excited him a bit more as a director.
Mm-hmm.
The budget is gone here. He's definitely going low-fi.
He's got about 20 to work with. Let's see how much it actually did.
So...
2 million.
Yeah, so the budget has gone down substantially. But when you're working in a forced perspective genre, you can do that. And when you're shooting in Canada, you can do that.
Yeah.
Where I think we run into problems with Diary of the Dead, although I do have positive things to say too, but something that is just unavoidable is I can't help but get the feeling that Romero was really impressed with himself with this found footage.
It's definitely a little more pretentious than
definitely in the script, and definitely he seems to really think he's like on the crest of a wave. Like he's really breaking new ground and reestablishing George Romero as the master of horror. And I would get behind him if he was right about that. But people have been here before him and kind of better. It's an adequate zombie romp, and it will give you the payoff of the bloody violence and what you come to want from a zombie movie. And it justifies its own existence within the found footage, although it's constant reminding you of the fact that it's found footage.
One thing that hurts the films, and this is a constant problem with any film that does this sort of style, is you're going to have one character throughout the movie filming the entire time, and of course people looking at him saying, "Put the camera down."
Yeah.
Put the camera down. Put the camera down, and they would be right. And they keep on holding camera for a stupid amount of time.
The thing is that really frustrates me about this is that the woman, the central character of this, the woman who is constantly telling him to turn the camera off, is not right a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Romero has reset the clock here.
It's almost like a reboot.
We're not progressing from Land of the Dead here. This is ground zero of the zombie epidemic. Everything starts new. A bunch of film students are making a mummy horror movie out in the woods, and they start hearing weird reports on the radio.
Yeah.
The group basically splits in two. Some of them go to this mansion owned by the wealthy student to sort of party and wait out whatever's going on. And the rest return to their university campus to collect their various loved ones and see what there is to see.
Yeah.
All of this, since they have the camera crews with them, is being documented by the people as it happens. And I think if you were a film student and this was happening, and, you know, something as crazy as the dead coming back to life, and you were at ground zero in it, your instinct would be to keep filming. Now, you'd be filming the stuff that you were seeing out the window of your car, or the encounters with the zombies.
Yeah.
You would not be filming yourself walking in the hallway and knocking on your girlfriend's door.
No, that would be lame.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have to explain that in a lame sort of way.
And over and above that, she is the person, and they explain this right away, who cut the footage together.
Yeah.
So we also have this very invasive narration that keeps taking us out of the movie.
Yeah.
I would have much rather just watched the footage and had to fill in the blanks myself. You know, we're 5 movies into the Romero world. I think we should have a fairly good understanding of how the zombies work. You know?
Another thing that definitely hurts this movie, and it is once again because of the budget, but a lot of the special effects are done
digitally,
and you could totally tell.
Yeah, especially the bullet hits. They really bother me. They just don't look good.
No.
Like, if they looked okay, I guess I would just live with it. I'd say, yeah, that's not a squib, but I will call it a day. But it's so obviously animated that it kind of takes me out of it.
Yeah.
It looks cheap.
Yeah.
And especially coming off of Land, which did not look cheap. It kind of sort of stings a little.
Yeah. One thing that I think works really well, and he uses it quite well within this, once again, subgenre, is when they get to the house at the end.
Right.
That is a really well shot and actually quite kind of scary sequence in the film, and that's when the power of the movie starts to really sort of kick into gear.
Yeah. And it's isolated moments, too.
Yeah.
They pull footage, quote-unquote, off of the internet.
Yeah.
So we keep seeing random news footage of people encountering zombies.
Yeah.
And then the, completely pointless attempt of the media to cover it up.
Yeah.
And I liked a lot of those isolated scenes. In fact, it is isolated scenes and moments of the movie that sort of salvage it into a recommend. It's not an out-and-out disaster, but it's got some problems. But most of those scenes are separate from our core group, I find. Just the idea of all the people posting on YouTube. There's that woman who says, I'm in Tokyo, it's really bad here. And all you have to do is just imagine what a place that populated.
Yeah.
Like, what a shitstorm that would be and how quickly. Right?
Yeah.
The military raiding an apartment and shooting an old couple and a bunch of zombies.
Wow, he did get a lot of cameos out of this movie, though.
Most of them are audio cameos.
Yeah, you've got Guillermo del Toro, Wes Craven, Stephen King,
Quentin Tarantino.
Quentin Tarantino, Tom Savini comes back.
Yeah. But you have to, with the exception of Tom Savini, you have to listen to all of those.
Yeah.
Also, Greg Nicotero, for those of you who are fans, plays a zombie in the hospital.
Yeah.
So yeah, for the zombie nerds out there, there's plenty of stuff to see. Mm-hmm. I think that there's also some off-note humor. I'm remembering an encounter with an Amish farmer.
Yes.
Which just seemed a little off-tune with the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
If the movie had already established a tone of sort of goofiness, then I might have accepted that, but it was just a little too weird, a little too funny in the wrong time of the movie.
Yeah.
And again, when spoilers, that guy kills himself, it's a very unconvincing CGI scythe death. But it makes me ask myself, do you think you could physically be strong enough to not only drive a scythe through your own head, but through the head of a zombie behind you that's attacking you?
You're asking for credibility. George Romero zombie film.
So yeah, it does get a little serious. It'll get a little silly, and if you'd embrace that, that'd be fine. But we also have some really pretentious scenes too.
Yeah.
The worst of it is handed to the professor, sort of the guy was sort of supervising the shoot, and he definitely represents Romero in that he's this old kind of bitter man looking at the youth of today with some sort of vague disgust. He obviously hasn't given up hope because he's teaching them, but this is not how the world should be, and he's always calling people on it, and not subtly.
You think it's Romero? That's the sort of.
Well, I think that's who he most identifies with. He has this huge speech about old men in mirrors towards the end of the movie.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I really felt Romero grinding his axe through that character. I could be wrong. I haven't had an interview with Romero to discuss him.
Yeah, I just thought it was just him sort of making fun of the world of academia, or maybe his own disgust too, but whatever.
But you get the
feeling...
I
digress.
He seems like he's got like a hard background to him, like he could kill and kick ass if he wanted, but instead he chooses to use a bow and arrow. You know, it's just always pointing out the other people's faults and wrongs, and basically along for the ride because he doesn't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah,
by his own admissions, and an alcoholic. I don't see he having a long life expectancy in the new zombie world that he is presented with.
Yeah.
There's also, what's her name? Tatiana Maslany.
Maslany.
Saskatchewan actress.
Regina.
She plays Mary. It's a small supporting role. Doesn't last too deep into the movie, but
no.
Star spotting, and I like to support Canadian talent. And
have
she's
you watched
local.
any of her show?
I haven't seen Orphan Black,
Neither
but I'm told
have I.
that it's really good.
Yeah, from everybody.
And I just generally blandly will support any Canadian talent, especially if they're from my neck of the woods. So
yeah,
go girl, way to be in a Romero
Tatiana
movie.
Maslany.
So I think what we're saying is we got a mixed bag.
I will say this: I had a greater appreciation for Diary
upon revisiting.
It has its creaks and moans and obvious problems. Yeah. You know, the whole, and that's part of the subgenre which is playing. I think is part of it. Yeah. It had been done to death almost by the time this movie had come out.
Yeah,
there's been other films of Blair Witch's quality. Some of the writing, like in all of Romero's films, is just clunky, and the actors really have to sell it, and they're not exactly a talent. There's a lot of actually sort of semi-popular Canadian actors in this movie.
Yeah,
or even celebrities such as Brian Mulrooney's kid.
Mulrooney.
Another face you want to slap.
Yeah. Yeah, well, again, it's kind of cool for me in a way. I was like, welcome to Canada, Romero, but his movies do feel different. The movies he made in Canada do feel different than the movies he made in the United States. But to be fair, there's, decades of time separating them as well, so...
Well, he definitely had more than one zombie story up his sleeve since...
Yeah. Generally speaking, kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think the first time you watch it, you're kind of off-put by the found footage or the forced perspective format. Yeah. When you can go back and just dismiss all of that and try and just watch it as a straight-up zombie movie, then I think you can have some fun with it.
I think Romero is a very good master at creating suspense with slow zombies. Whenever it's, just focusing on the zombies and not their sort of extra character diatribe.
Right.
Where they're sort of long, well-edited, suspenseful sequences of, zombies kind of lurking around and slowly hunting these humans. Yeah. It's really well done. Whether it's the house or the hospital. I remember the hospital scene being quite good. And it has that sort of, once again, computer CGI death of the zombie's eyeballs kind of squeezing out of the head. Which is probably...
defib a zombie's head.
Yes, it's the kill of the movie, But
what I like is that they defib the zombie's head, and doesn't it still come back up again?
Something like that, I think so.
It's just scrambled the brains for a second, but no, I still want to eat you.
Why do you think he went back to almost like a reboot for the beginning of Diary?
My guess is a lot of it would have to do with the budget.
Yeah.
I think that since he didn't have a big studio backing him and it wasn't going to be a lock, that it's easier to not have the landscape be overgrown and desolate and have a cast of thousands. If you can bear it down into the window of your camera lens, you can, shoot in the modern world fairly easily and work around the supposed zombie apocalypse and help your budget. And I think, for a low-budget movie, there is some punch to it. There's a few good scenes. I kind of like that one zombie that gets the jar of acid smashed over his head and his brain melts out of his skull as he sort of staggers away. It certainly has moments where, the CG works for it. But I'm old school, and I want
the prosthetics. The prosthetics always look good. They'll always be better. Yeah. Hands down. Hands down.
Last time anyone counted, 53 million people were dying every year. 150,000 every day, 107 every minute. It had become an us versus them world. All we were looking for was a place where there was no them.
Lousy times make lousy people.
All the wrong people are dying.
This island needs to be rid of them.
We like it here. We think the best way of seeing this through is here. We don't want no place. We want some place. Like where? Like an island.
It's an island off the coast of Delaware. Come on over.
The only families that ever lived on this island were yours and mine. No strangers.
What are you gonna do with them?
They're Muldoons. It's up to me to save them.
You can't save a person who's already dead.
Somebody's gonna find a cure for this. A beautiful place to live.
Okay, we've made it to 2009 and Survival of the Dead.
Survival. I'm a survivor. What's that Beyonce song?
You're asking me what that... I have no idea.
All right,
I couldn't pick Beyonce out of a fucking lineup. Seriously.
Wow.
I really couldn't.
Wow.
I really couldn't. Survival of the Dead. Here's the thing. This is Romero's absolute nadir worst zombie movie.
And you're coming out already with guns a-blazing.
That's where I start with this.
And
it reminds me of... Early in his career, he did this movie called Night Riders, starring Ed Harris. This very pretentious, like they should be carnies or something like that.
Yeah.
They sort of dress up and treat each other with medieval rules and whatnot, but they ride around on motorbikes and are very arrogant. And it's an almost unwatchably terrible movie.
Yeah,
it's really bad. If not for Night Riders, I think that this would probably be his worst film, period. I kind of felt like, I think Romero always maybe resented that he was just thought of as a horror guy and not like this sort of brilliant political, angry social commentary guy. He was just dismissed as a gore guy. And I think that he had, honestly, always wanted to make a Western.
Well, yeah, it's kind of a weird mix, since we'll get right to it, that one of the things that clearly does not work is that Zombies is not a Western movie. It shouldn't be. You can make a zombie comedy, or you can make a zombie film funny, as case in point to Zombieland. And
if you want to make a zombie Western, you're welcome to try. I would make it.
I would make it mix,
but make it a period Western, because I think honest Westerns, as we understand them, don't exist in the modern age. Right?
Yeah.
The world isn't as wild as it used to be.
Yeah.
Basic premise of this is some survivors, one of whom, or a few of whom we met in the previous movie. They robbed the...
there is some connective tissue, pardon the pun.
They robbed the weapons off of our characters in the previous
Hey, doesn't Land also have some connective tissue to survival?
Alan Van Sprang is in all three of these. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the soldier, right?
Correct.
But he dies in Land.
But he's not the same character, just the same actor. Like I say, Romero really, if he finds an actor he likes, he will reuse them. So he was available, he called them back.
Yeah.
A bunch of survivors find an island that is populated and relatively safe, except for there's two feuding families.
Yep.
And the family's principal basis of the feud is sort of religious in basis, is that one guy thinks that the zombies can be saved and that they should just sort of be corralled until something cure can be found. And the other guy is a kill 'em all and let God sort 'em out sort of kind of approach. And I gotta say, in a world full of zombies, I'd have to side with him.
Yeah.
But these survivors wander into the middle of this petty feud.
Yeah.
And played by a bunch of very familiar Canadian TV actors.
Kenneth Welsh, I think, is one of them.
Throwing bizarre, not quite Newfie, not quite Southern accents. I don't know Irish or I don't know what the fuck they were going for.
Yeah, you can't take any of the performance seriously with this movie, and I don't know if that's either... Is that intentional?
Well, again, he does swing for some humor in this. Some of the humor kind of works. But there are times where he asks us to take it very seriously.
Yeah.
And I can't.
Yeah.
And the characters of all of his movies are the worst drawn.
Yeah.
There's one guy who's completely identified by the fact that he is Latino. There is one woman who's completely identified by the fact that she's a lesbian. Every fucking time she's on screen, she reminds us that she's a lesbian. The first time we see her, she's masturbating.
Yeah.
It's really kind of embarrassing how bad the screenplay is at this point. And, you know, as much as Diary had its problems, it is made to look like a masterpiece when compared to Survival.
Yeah, he did write it.
The thing is like, I would almost be tempted, if somebody hadn't seen any of the Romero movies, to try and experiment with someone and say, by all means watch the 6 Romero movies, watch them in reverse order. Start with Survival and work backwards to Night of the Living Dead. Because you will get him, like, your experience will improve with each subsequent movie, more or less. You know, it gets kind of grave when you get to the Dawn and Night, but, like, I don't know. In a way, this is kind of a sad petering out for Romero's zombie movies.
You think he's done?
Well, I don't think he's entirely done. I know he and his son have started a Kickstarter to get Night of the Living Dead Origins made, which presumes to be a period movie that's going to explain actually why the zombies came to be. But he's not going to direct that. His son is. And then there's a TV series based on a comic book that
Empire of the Dead, yeah.
He story outlined this comic book for Marvel, and the comic sells well, ironically on the heels of the popularity of The Walking Dead. So they're going to make another zombie TV series. But my guess is that he'll get a production credit on a paycheck. But I don't know. He's kind of long in the tooth. If he wants to make more zombie movies, I by all means let him. But on the sort of diminishing returns of Land Diary and Survival of the Dead, it's hard for me to say, yeah, Romero, keep him coming, you know? If he wants to make another zombie, I'm in. I'm all in. I will watch it. But I kind of get the feeling with Survival that I can't find an isolated scene in Survival to be really excited about. Like I said, there were some great scenes isolated in Diary of the Dead. That scene with all the zombies erupting from the river to take down Fiddler's Green and Land of the Dead, very strong. You know, and it sort of made briefly zombies kind of intimidating for a brief moment again. There's nothing close to that here. Nothing close to that here. Alan Van Sprang is our lead, and I guess we like him because he's a cool badass, but we're kind of hurt that we know that he's sort of, you know, established himself stealing guns off of teenagers. He's kind of an ass.
He's not a nice person.
But the people that he has to deal with on this island are all so impossibly stubborn and ignorant that they're more of an obstacle than the zombies. I'm almost sympathetic to just shoot them and take their farm because they're this goddamn dumb.
You know you're in a bad place when you're cheering for the zombies to eat all the rest of the characters.
Really? Like, and that's where it starts coming to. And it's unfortunate because all of these Canadian actors that I see in Canadian movies and television are showing up, and I gotta, you know, if I could get a gig in a Romero movie, I would have been in this fucking movie, and I would have been thrilled to be there. Yeah. But I would have been there knowing, unfortunately, that I was in the worst of the Romero zombie movies, which is kind of heartbreaking. And he doesn't bring anything new. I guess, like, with Diary, he thought he was bringing something new with the forced perspective. He's
trying to make a Western comedy, which is...
Well, but as far as the zombies go, there's a subplot in which one of the characters is trying to convince the zombies to find alternate food sources.
Yeah.
A character's twin sister has turned into a zombie, and she is able to somehow... It's not a docile zombie, but the zombie seems less freaked by her.
Yeah.
And anomalously to the other zombies, wait for it, this zombie goes horseback riding from time to time. Heavy sigh.
Very, very Lady Godiva, but she keeps the clothes on.
Yeah, I don't know. So the whole twist of the movie, and I'm just going to completely spoil the end of the movie, but because these people can't stop their feuding and a fighting, even though they are actually successful in convincing the zombies to eat an alternate food source. Mm-hmm. They're too busy and too convinced that the things are fucked to stop and have the conversation. And the person who is about to give them that information is shot and killed before they have that opportunity. And the two patriarchs of the two feuding families, of course, end up dead. And we roll credits on their zombies still fighting each other in this endless, pointless fucking fight.
Yep.
If the theme of the movie was pointlessness, I guess there's some success, because that's kind of how I felt as the credits rolled.
Yeah.
And what you said about the computer effects...
Yeah, they're pretty bad here.
The worst of all of the 6, yet again.
Yeah.
So I've just taken a hot, wet shit all over Survival of the Dead.
I was going to say, tell me...
What would you like to say about Survival of the Dead?
Once again, it's definitely the weakest of the movies. Just the whole concept that he's tried to make a comedy western and a zombie film, it did not work. I did not find any of it funny. I like once again, the sort of connection from Diary. I thought that, it sort of expanded the universe somewhat.
Yeah.
But everything about this movie just seemed very false note. Whether it's the dialogue, the story itself, he's revisiting old themes about how people struggling to sort of take care of the dead, thinking that their loved ones and a cure had been made. We've seen this story, so there's nothing new to it. It kind of ends in a thud, and it is sort of disappointing that this might be the last Romero zombie film that he does make, and if so, it's like the Star Wars trilogy. The new one is definitely the weakest.
Yeah.
So
and it's unfortunate to finish that way.
It's disappointing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who knows? Maybe Night of the Living Dead Origins will be a brilliant screenplay.
It's mercifully short, though. That was the one thing. 90 minutes, so...
And I'm a completist, so, I'm going to watch it. But unlike Diary, because honestly, when I first watched Diary, my heart was a little bit broken, too.
Yeah.
But like you said, when I revisited it, I actually liked it.
Yeah.
So I optimistically, gave it some time and came back to Survival of the Dead. And it stung just as much the second time.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's unfortunate that this is where we finish with Romero, but... That said, I would just take a moment to, instead of cursing the darkness, let's light a candle.
Candle in the wind.
In a world where zombie movies come out every week, Survival of the Dead does nothing to distinguish itself. But I'm sure there's an audience of people out there who will like it more than I do.
Completists will need to see it.
People might like it more than I do. I think that maybe if this movie wasn't written and directed by George Romero, I might like it more. But because I hold Romero to a higher standard and feel that he could do better than this, this kind of chaps me.
Yeah.
But I have nothing but gratitude for Romero for creating this entire zombie universe.
He's given us so much.
He has given us so much. So, this is the movie he wanted to make. He always wanted to make a Western. He got to make that Western. A lot of the times people say that the passion project, the project you want to make your entire life, is usually your worst film.
Yeah.
To everybody except you. So part of me hopes that to Romero, this is his favorite film. Because otherwise, it doesn't make sense to me. And so it was time to rank these 6 George Romero zombie movies.
I don't think we're going to match, dude.
No?
No.
I don't know. I thought there was a chance today, but we'll find out.
All right. But if so...
I know that we're going to match in some places.
Yes. If so, we should celebrate.
Yes.
All right, should we get to it?
Yeah. What was your least favorite and
why?
Survival
of the Dead. No, surprise. It's definitely the weak child of the family, the black sheep, if you will.
Yeah.
It's just one large thud. It's stanky. Stanky like my feet sometimes.
Yeah. You wouldn't guess that it was a Romero film.
No. No, you really wouldn't. You really wouldn't. So that would be number 6, I guess?
That would be number 6.
Number 5. It's close. It's close, but Diary of the Dead would be number 5. Just the whole concept has been there, done that. You know, you're not doing anything new there, George. I think the writing's a little bit better, and as a zombie thriller, it has its moments.
Yeah.
The low budget definitely hurts it. Once again, we're biased against CGI gore and blood usually. We're old school prosthetics.
If it's done well, I'll give it a pass.
Yeah.
But I can't call it well done in this case.
Okay. I guess next it would be Day of the Dead. I think the acting is too over the top. The villains talk like this all the time with naughty potty mouths.
Yeah.
And it just, it's very high school acting.
Yeah.
Especially considering that I know he can direct actors. Sometimes he gets lucky, but I had no connection to the characters. I couldn't wait for the movie to be over every time those soldiers talked.
Right.
And when they do die, it's glorious. But
no tears are shed for them. That is true.
But it's Day of the Dead. The special effects are amazing.
Absolutely.
Next up would be Land of the Dead. I think the story and concept, and also the budget obviously helps. It didn't bother you as much that you are clearly meant to sympathize with the zombies, just because, I love me some monsters, and they're great zombies, but I get what you're coming from. I love the whole Donald Rumsfeld, excuse me. A little homage, if you will. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, George. Then followed by the original. And it was tough saying this, because both are so good. But Night of the Living Dead is so good. The black and white helps it, I think. I mean, it doesn't forget its B-movie roots, but no one knew what they had. I don't think even George knew what they had.
Yeah.
It is literally lightning in a bottle. The concept is so strong that it just elevates it. It's just a very good story.
Yeah.
And so some pretty horrifying moments. Shout out to the whole idea that the Sound of Music was all done with their whole cheap collection of
stock. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. And at number 1, one of the best horror movies ever made, Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead is a great horror movie / social commentary on capitalism and consumerism. It has definitely, I think it's the most suspenseful out of all of them. There's just sequences of the soldiers fighting with zombies all on top of each other, and the whole bitey.
Yeah.
That's horrifying to me, and it's slow
Squirmy.
zombies, and it's slow zombies. Or you see these things walking down the hallway; they just don't stop. There's that constant dread. There's that other zombie movie, The Dead, that has that great sequence in Africa where the guy sleeps in a tree because there's so many zombies walking around everywhere, and he can't even get a good night's sleep because eventually zombies start climbing the tree to come after and get them. It's inevitable; they'll get you.
They're after you.
And Dawn, it makes that very, very real. And there's so many great characters. Zombies.
So Dawn of the Dead then.
Dawn of the Dead is number 1.
Okay. Well, we're close, but no cigars.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
In 6th place,
Yeah.
unsurprisingly, Survival of the Dead.
Yeah.
When the big twist of the film is unleashed and a major character has her brains blown out,
Yeah.
I felt absolutely fucking nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I guess the credits were going to roll soon, and I felt good about that.
Yeah.
But, ouch. I don't like to be severe. I don't like to be, snarky and tauntful, especially about a director whom I love.
Yeah.
But if any film deserves it, it's Survival of the Dead.
Yep.
Maybe it's worth watching just for that.
Yeah. If you're a completist.
In 5th place, and the rest of the movies I recommend, by the way, In fifth place, I will put Diary of the Dead. I think it's half good and half okay.
Yeah.
I just wish that they almost wouldn't have bothered with the forced perspective in some ways. You know, maybe you just wanted to do almost an anthology zombie movie, just a bunch of short stories. No one's tried that yet. How about a strictly anthology zombie themed movie? How about it, Hollywood? Diary of the Dead isn't that, but it's interesting and watchable enough in its own right. So this would be fourth place now, Land of the Dead.
Yeah, see, that's what I figured you would.
I love the production values, and I love the casting.
Yeah.
And I think that this is like an assured, confident form, in good form, Romero. I think he had time to get that script the way he wanted it to be, warts and all. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he had the budget to execute the vision.
Yeah.
So, yay. It's unfortunate that he came out late enough in the zombie sort of renaissance that it wasn't more of a hit than it kind of deserved to be.
Yeah.
I think it's under-recognized. A lot of people are dismissive of Land of the Dead.
Mm.
The reason I still have to put Day of the Dead in third place, because, like, I know it's dark, and I know that the acting, especially by our antagonists, is harsh. I do think that this movie, as flawed as it is doing exactly what Romero wanted it to do. I think he was in a dark place, and he meant to make a bitter, bleak fucking movie. And he did. Yeah. And he did. Now, it's not as fun, especially coming off the bounce and pomp of Dawn of the Dead, and what would be the relatively, you know, comparable light Land of the Dead.
Yeah.
This is the darkest corner. This is the long dark night of the soul for Romero. And he went there, and he didn't flinch. And it ended up hurting him in the long run. But I kind of respect, in a lot of ways, the vision. And we've said it before, and we'll say it again. If you're here for the teeth and tissue, if you're here for the special effects and the zombie gore, Day of the Dead's number 1 on the list. Yeah. If that's where you're coming from. It's like, it almost feels like a forbidden film. Like you're seeing things that you shouldn't see. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of effective for that. So there it is. Second place, I agree with you. Night of the Living Dead. I love it. I love it.
Yep.
And it is a capital C classic.
Yep.
But for every one time I will watch Night of the Living Dead, I'll probably watch Dawn of the Dead twice.
Yeah.
Dawn of the Dead is fun and big and, you know,
frightening.
gruesome and
frightening. It's frightening. It's a frightening idea, and it's a frightening movie.
The trajectory of the story and the sort of shifts in tone, you can't compare it to anything else. Mm-hmm. I know it's really hardcore 70s, and I know that the zombies look blue, mm-hmm. and I know that there's a sort of dissociation through time that a lot of people will feel mm-hmm. and find it hard to watch. And I frankly feel sorry for them.
Yep.
Because they're missing out on one of the greatest horror movies I personally have ever seen.
Yeah.
Hyperbole? Perhaps.
Yes.
I fucking love me some George Romero.
Yeah, it's good. It's a classic movie.
I'm sorry, George, for all the shit talking about Survival of the Dead, but you know, it's the same thing I say about the Coen brothers or like any filmmakers that I really love. In a way, it makes me harder on them.
Yeah.
I just expect more. And I expect more than Survival of the Dead from a man who made Night, Dawn, Day, and Land of the Dead.
Fair enough. Little side note for A Night of the Living Dead. There are some classic movies that don't age well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they don't do well over time. I'm looking at you, Texas Chainsaw, and also Blair Witch to some extent, because I don't think Blair Witch has aged all that well. But Night, I can still put on and still get thrown into that universe without even question.
Yeah.
There's something about it that is, and like it's a scary, and it's got its creaks and moans because of its age. I mean, it's a small budget film from the 60s, is it not?
Yeah, 68.
68.
Yeah.
But I still get engaged by it.
It works.
It works. It's so good. Terrifying.
I'm just going to drop down an honorary Jerry Award here to George A. Romero.
Yeah.
Like I say, it feels like we're doing a post-mortem, and we're not. Romero is still around, and maybe he'll surprise me and he does have another movie in him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's probably going to produce this Romero, zombie TV series and collect his money, is my guess. But
yeah.
Like I said, I will watch anything that he brings.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thanks. And if you have not heard Romero, yeah,
get on it.
Well,
You're missing out.
I'm glad you listened to this podcast.
You're missing out.
And you can look at some of the other Romero, but I think that when you look at his work with Stephen King and his work with the zombies are really where you want to focus. Well, that may wrap things up for the Romerothon, but there's still a lot more to be said about this zombie genre, and there will be more of the Dead Rank and Review episodes to come. I hope you enjoyed this special episode of Rank and Review, and I hope if you have any feedback to send me that you will do so at rankandreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. My name's Larry Parsons. I'm your host in Random Canadian, and I really appreciate you listening. If you could be good enough as to give us a positive review on iTunes or like the page on Facebook, just follow us on Twitter, anything like that would help the morale and help sort of keep the lights going for me, because the more people listening, the more worthwhile this whole thing feels. Thanks, you guys, and we'll see you again.